Following the Battle of Asculum in 279 BC, Pyrrhus spent the winter in Tarentum, where two significant opportunities for expansion arose. The first came with news of the death of the Macedonian king, Ptolemy Ceraunus, who had been killed in battle against the invading Galatians. This event presented Pyrrhus with the chance to return to Macedonia and reclaim the throne. At the same time, ambassadors from the Sicilian Greek cities of Agrigentum, Syracuse, and Leontini arrived in Tarentum, offering to place their cities under his authority if he could drive the Carthaginians from the island. Pyrrhus ultimately chose to pursue the Sicilian venture, drawn by the substantial wealth and resources of the Greek cities there. This decision was influenced by the political instability in Macedonia and the uncertain challenge posed by the Galatians. However, the Tarentines were displeased when they learned of Pyrrhus's plans. They demanded that he either continue the war against the Romans, for which they had originally invited him, or leave their territory entirely. Pyrrhus, unwilling to abandon his hold over Tarentum and other cities he had seized, acted decisively. He stationed strong garrisons, allocating more than half of his Epirot troops to secure these cities, and instructed the Tarentines to remain loyal to his authority until his return. The Sicily that Pyrrhus was heading to had long been a region of conflict between the Greeks and the Carthaginians. The first Carthaginian military campaign on the island occurred during the reign of the Persian king Cyrus. The Carthaginians sent an army to Sicily, led by the commander Malchus, who achieved notable success. Malchus established Carthaginian dominance over all the Phoenician settlements in Sicily and the Elymians. Additionally, he appears to have coerced the Greek city of Selinus into forming an alliance with Carthage. This campaign marked the beginning of the Greco-Punic conflicts in Sicily, a struggle that would persist for over 300 years. Pyrrhus soon initiated extensive naval preparations, transforming the port of Tarentum into a hub of intense activity. Shipbuilding and repairs were conducted on a large scale, alongside the production of sails, rigging, and other necessary equipment. War galleys were constructed and armed, while crews underwent rigorous training and discipline. Simultaneously, efforts were made to stockpile provisions and assemble military supplies. These operations proceeded with great efficiency, capturing the attention and involvement of all those in the region. Following his usual practice, Pyrrhus tasked his trusted diplomat, Cineas, with making preliminary arrangements in Sicily. Cineas departed from Tarentum with a small fleet of ships and galleys, and, after a brief journey, arrived safely in Syracuse. Upon his arrival, he found the city's leadership prepared to welcome Pyrrhus and to support the proclamation of Pyrrhus's young son, Alexander, as king. Cineas successfully finalized these arrangements and then dispatched envoys to various cities in the northern regions of Sicily. These envoys communicated the plan to install an heir of King Athocles on the throne and sought the cooperation of local leaders. Through his diplomatic prudence and skill, Cineas secured widespread agreement with the proposal. Consequently, much of the Sicilian Greek-controlled territory pledged its support, and the populace was prepared to welcome Pyrrhus and his young son upon their arrival. As the Sicilians sought the support of Pyrrhus, Mago, a Carthaginian general, approached their longtime allies, the Romans, with an offer of assistance. He proposed sending 120 ships to aid Rome, likely prompting the renewal of the Roman-Carthaginian alliance for the third and final time. After solidifying this agreement, Mago sailed to Tarentum to meet Pyrrhus. Officially, he claimed to be seeking peace between Pyrrhus and Carthage. However, it is widely believed, most notably according to the historian Justin, that Mago's true objective was to assess Pyrrhus's intentions regarding Sicily. The Carthaginians likely aimed to deter Pyrrhus from invading Sicily by encouraging him to remain in Italy and continue his conflict with the Romans. Sicily, as can be seen on the map, has a triangular shape. By the time of Pyrrhus's expedition, only the southern part of the island was under Sicilian control. The northeastern and northwestern regions were held by foreign hostile powers. In the northeastern corner of Sicily stood the city of Messana, known today as Messina. At this time, Messana was the stronghold of the Mamertines, a warlike group that had crossed from Italy over the Straits of Messana several years earlier. Having seized control of this part of the island, the Mamertines had successfully resisted all attempts by the Sicilians to expel them. The Carthaginians had formed an alliance with the Mamertines and sent a fleet including 500 Roman marines to Messina to prevent Pyrrhus from landing in Sicily. In line with this new alliance, the Carthaginians, along with their Roman allies, attempted to assault the rebel garrison at Rhegium, but were unsuccessful in capturing it. They then stationed their fleet at Messina to guard the Straits of Messina, anticipating Pyrrhus's arrival. Pyrrhus departed from Tarentum approximately 2 years and 4 months after his initial arrival in Italy, likely in the late summer of 278 BC. His first stop was the city of Locris, where he left his son Alexander in command of an Epirot garrison. Pyrrhus's fleet comprised 60 warships from Tarentum, accompanied by a substantial number of transport vessels. Historical records state that his invasion force included elephants and 8,000 cavalry. However, this figure is generally considered inaccurate and is often reinterpreted as referring either to a total force of 8,000 men or 8,000 infantry in addition to the cavalry. Pyrrhus successfully bypassed the Carthaginian blockade and landed on the western coast of Sicily at the city of Tauromenium. The local ruler there had already pledged allegiance to him. From Tauromenium, Pyrrhus sailed to Catana, where he was reportedly received with great enthusiasm. The citizens, viewing him as a liberator from the oppressive Carthaginians, welcomed him with golden crowns. At Catana, Pyrrhus disembarked his army and received reinforcements, estimated to number approximately 3,000 men from the surrounding cities. Pyrrhus subsequently advanced towards Syracuse, utilizing both his fleet and his army marching overland. The Carthaginians were reported to have assembled an army of 50,000 men and a fleet of 100 ships to besiege Syracuse and ravage the surrounding countryside. However, Pyrrhus's swift advance caught them off guard, as 30 ships from their fleet had been dispatched elsewhere. When the Carthaginians unexpectedly encountered Pyrrhus's fleet, advancing toward them in full battle formation, they declined to engage. This allowed Pyrrhus's ships to occupy the port without resistance. Pyrrhus entered the harbor triumphantly and secured control of the island of Ortygia. He mediated a reconciliation between the two rival tyrants in Syracuse, consolidating his authority over the city. Additionally, Pyrrhus gained possession of the Syracusan fleet, consisting of 141 warships. Although this fleet was over a decade old and inadequately manned, it significantly bolstered Pyrrhus's naval strength, increasing his fleet to more than 200 vessels. This numerical advantage gave Pyrrhus a decisive edge over the Carthaginian navy. Despite significantly outnumbering the Epirot army, the Carthaginians withdrew without engaging in battle. This decision, though seemingly surprising given their numerical superiority, likely stemmed from several strategic considerations. Without control of the seas, continuing the siege would have been futile. Additionally, the Carthaginian generals may have been reluctant to confront a renowned commander like Pyrrhus, especially one who had the advantage of war elephants in open combat. It is also plausible that Greek historians exaggerated the size of the Carthaginian forces, further complicating an accurate assessment. Regardless of the reasons for the Carthaginian retreat, Pyrrhus emerged in full control of Syracuse, the most powerful city in Sicily. Alongside the fleet, he also gained possession of the Syracusan siege train. The equipment and expertise acquired with this asset would prove invaluable for Pyrrhus in the campaigns that lay ahead. The Carthaginian forces encountered by Pyrrhus in Sicily differed in several key ways from those of the Greeks, Macedonians, and Romans. According to the historian Polybius, the Carthaginians wholly neglect their infantry, though they do take some slight interest in their cavalry. The reason is that they employ foreign mercenaries rather than citizen levies. While this statement may be somewhat exaggerated, Carthaginian citizens did serve in the defense of their city and in their naval forces. It is largely accurate when referring to their overseas armies. Carthaginian armies abroad were composed of troops from diverse nationalities, led by Carthaginian officers drawn from the aristocracy. At this time, the majority of their forces were African spearmen, primarily recruited from Carthage's Libyan territories, with a smaller number drawn from Spain. Referring to these soldiers as mercenaries may be misleading, as they were recruited from regions under Carthaginian control and might be more accurately described as auxiliaries. These core troops were often supplemented by true mercenaries recruited from outside Carthage's empire. Historical records mention Gauls, Italians, Numidians, and Greeks among these forces, with Greek mercenaries likely being the most prevalent in Sicily. Tactically, the Carthaginians employed a battle formation similar to the Greeks. They arranged their forces in the traditional Hellenistic style, with a single line of infantry in the center, flanked by cavalry, rather than the multiple line formation used by the Romans. During their early conflicts with the Greeks in Sicily, the Carthaginians primarily relied on their infantry in the center to deliver the main thrust of their attack. However, during Pyrrhus's campaign, the Carthaginian army appears to have been either unable or unwilling to engage Pyrrhus's forces in open battle. Their battle line, composed mostly of tightly formed spear-armed infantry, was ill-equipped to counter Pyrrhus's pike-armed infantry and war elephants, which would have posed a significant challenge to their standard tactics. After securing control of Syracuse, Pyrrhus moved to the city of Leontini, which he also took under his control. He then advanced to Agrigentum, where he assumed command from the already allied Sosistratus. Pyrrhus also took control of the 30 other cities that had been under Sosistratus's authority. These cities contributed 8,000 infantry and 800 cavalry, which were regarded as highly capable, matching the quality of his own Epirot troops. Further positive developments came from the city of Enna, which had successfully expelled its Carthaginian garrison and aligned itself with Pyrrhus. With these additional reinforcements, Pyrrhus's army grew to a total of 30,000 infantry, 2,500 cavalry, and his war elephants. So far, Pyrrhus's campaign had been a smooth and largely unopposed march through southeastern Sicily, with the Greek cities welcoming him without resistance. After taking Agrigentum, he would need to cross the river Halicus to enter Carthaginian-controlled territory, which was hostile to him. Unfortunately, there is no detailed account of Pyrrhus's Sicilian campaign. Diodorus, whose account would have been based largely on the historian Hieronymus of Cardia, and was likely thorough and reliable, wrote a detailed history that has been lost. What remains is a brief epitome, compiled by a later Byzantine librarian, which provides only a vague overview of Pyrrhus's actions. This summary mentions several successful sieges, but lacks detailed information on battles against the Carthaginians. However, the historian Justin offers a different account, stating that Pyrrhus fought many successful battles with the Carthaginians. The term proelia, used by Justin, typically refers to land or naval battles rather than sieges. This suggests that in addition to laying siege to several cities, Pyrrhus may have also achieved victory in a number of battles against the Carthaginian forces. Goldsworthy highlights that the mountainous terrain of Sicily presents significant challenges for the movement of large armies and provides numerous strong defensive positions. This geography makes it difficult for a commander to engage an unwilling enemy in battle. In such a setting, controlling the cities becomes the key to controlling the island. As a result, sieges were likely more important than direct battles for any potential conqueror of Sicily. Justin's reference to battles could therefore be pointing to the two significant confrontations that took place in the final year of Pyrrhus's campaign against the Mamertines and the Carthaginians. Diodorus's account, which focuses primarily on sieges, may then offer an accurate depiction of the first 2 years of Pyrrhus's war in Sicily. The precise timeline of events during Pyrrhus's Sicilian campaign is not fully documented. It is likely that the period leading up to the gathering of his forces at Agrigentum took place over the remainder of 278 BC. Pyrrhus began the following year by continuing his westward march toward the city of Heraclea, where the Carthaginians had set up a defensive position along their border. Pyrrhus successfully stormed the city, capturing it from the Carthaginian garrison. Afterward, he took the city of Azones. From there, Pyrrhus advanced on Selinus, which surrendered to him without resistance. Up until this point, Pyrrhus had been engaging with cities that, although occupied by the Carthaginians, were primarily inhabited by Greek populations. However, from this point onward, Pyrrhus would be advancing into territories inhabited by the Elymians and the Carthaginians themselves, where he could expect stronger resistance. Despite this, the Elymian cities of Halicyae and Segesta surrendered to him without a fight. Pyrrhus then turned his attention to the Elymian city of Eryx, modern-day Eris. This city was strongly fortified with a large Carthaginian garrison and a naturally defensive position atop a mountain 750 meters high. At the summit stood a magnificent temple dedicated to Venus. The city sprawled along the hillside beneath the summit, and the ascent to it was long and steep from all sides. Here, the Carthaginians decided to make a stand and defend the city. Pyrrhus was compelled to lay siege to the city as the Carthaginian garrison put up strong resistance. After a brief siege, he decided to launch an assault. According to Diodorus, Pyrrhus personally led the attack, motivated by a desire to gain great renown and to be compared with Hercules. Plutarch provides a slightly different account, stating that Pyrrhus made a vow to Hercules. He promised to hold games and sacrifices in the god's honor if Hercules would grant him the distinction of being recognized by the Sicilian Greeks as a worthy adversary, worthy of his noble lineage and resources. Pyrrhus began the assault by using the missiles from his siege engines to clear the walls. He then brought up scaling ladders and was the first to climb them. Wearing his distinctive ornate armor, he quickly became a target for the Carthaginian defenders. According to reports, Pyrrhus fought bravely, pushing defenders off the walls, with many of them falling in heaps from his sword strikes. Despite the fierce combat, Pyrrhus himself remained unharmed. His actions were so impressive that they struck fear into his enemies. This display of courage was seen as a manifestation of divine inspiration, echoing the belief, as Homer suggested, that valor is a virtue often accompanied by a sense of divine possession and frenzy. By personally leading the assault on Eryx and being the first to scale the walls, Pyrrhus may have been trying to emulate Hercules as well as the legendary Alexander the Great, who was believed to be a descendant of gods. Alexander had similarly sought to surpass Hercules when he besieged the fortress of the Rock of Aornos. Alexander was the first to reach the summit, but after engaging in intense hand-to-hand combat with the defenders, he and his men suffered more wounds than they inflicted and were forced to retreat. Alexander ultimately took Aornos only after the defenders abandoned the fortress. In contrast, by capturing Eryx through direct assault, Pyrrhus could claim not only to have matched Hercules' feats, but possibly even surpassed Alexander's. Following the city's capture, Pyrrhus fulfilled his vow to Hercules by performing a grand sacrifice and hosting athletic games. He then secured the city by placing a garrison there. Pyrrhus next targeted the city of Iatia, which he intended to use as a base for an assault on the strategically important Carthaginian port of Panormus, known for having the finest harbor in Sicily. Iatia surrendered without resistance, and Pyrrhus proceeded to capture Panormus by storm. He then followed this success with the capture of the fortress of Hercte. By this point, Pyrrhus had effectively taken control of all Carthaginian-held territories in Sicily, except for Lilybaeum, the Carthaginian stronghold located at the western tip of the island, closest to Africa. Remarkably, within what was likely a single campaign season, Pyrrhus had successfully captured 3 cities and 1 fortress, 2 of which were positioned in highly defensible locations. His previous experiences at the court of Antigonus, along with the Syracusan siege equipment, proved to be invaluable in executing these successful campaigns. Pyrrhus then prepared to lay siege to Lilybaeum, which, if captured, would give him complete control over Sicily. The Carthaginians, realizing the strategic importance of this city, took drastic measures to prevent its fall. According to Diodorus, they successfully moved in reinforcements by gaining control of the seas. However, the details of Pyrrhus's fleet's fate are unclear due to the limited nature of our sources. Over a year later, after an attempt to rebuild his fleet, Pyrrhus's forces departed Sicily with only 110 warships. It is likely that at some point, either the Carthaginians had defeated the Greek fleet in battle, or the fleet had been destroyed by a storm, an event that frequently occurred in the later conflicts between the Carthaginians and Romans in Sicily. With Carthaginian naval supremacy, the task of besieging Lilybaeum became even more challenging for Pyrrhus. Diodorus reports that Carthaginian control of the sea enabled them to bring large shipments of grain, weapons, and a significant army from Africa. They also recruited mercenaries from Italy to bolster their forces. The influx of men and supplies was so great that, according to reports, they could not all fit within the city's walls. In anticipation of the siege, the Carthaginian garrison took extensive measures to strengthen the city's defenses. They fortified the land approaches by constructing additional walls, building towers, and digging a deep ditch nearly 20 meters in depth to protect the city. Before the siege began, the Carthaginians sent an embassy to Pyrrhus offering peace terms. They proposed a large sum of money and the loan of ships if Pyrrhus agreed to an alliance. Initially, Pyrrhus was inclined to accept these terms, which would have left the Carthaginians in control of Lilybaeum. However, his advisors and Greek allies persuaded him to reject the offer and push to drive the Carthaginians out of Sicily for good. They argued that allowing Carthage to retain Lilybaeum would give them a strategic base for any future attempts at recovery and expansion. Given the history of conflict over the previous 2 centuries, this advice was likely sound. Pyrrhus ultimately agreed and told the ambassadors that there could be no peace unless the Carthaginians abandoned all of Sicily and accepted the Libyan Sea as the boundary between themselves and the Greeks. Pyrrhus established camp near the walls of Lilybaeum and began testing the Carthaginian defenses with frequent attacks using rotating units of troops. However, the Carthaginian defenses were too robust, and the defenders successfully repelled each assault. Realizing the difficulty of a direct assault, Pyrrhus shifted to a more prolonged siege, bringing in larger siege engines than those he had used in Syracuse. He also initiated mining operations to undermine the walls. Despite these efforts, the siege dragged on for 2 months, and the Carthaginian preparations proved effective. Pyrrhus's forces made little progress, unable to breach the city's defenses. As winter approached, Pyrrhus made the decision to abandon the siege of Lilybaeum. The strength of the Carthaginian defenses, combined with their control of the seas, had proven too difficult to overcome. Shifting his focus, Pyrrhus planned to follow in the footsteps of Agathocles and launch an invasion of Africa, while continuing his campaign in Sicily. However, before he could carry out this new venture, It was necessary to build a new fleet. To accomplish this, Pyrrhus ordered the Greek cities to provide the necessary resources and crews for the construction and manning of the fleet. Pyrrhus's siege of Lilybaeum marked the peak of his Sicilian campaign, after which his position quickly began to deteriorate. His decision to order the construction of a new fleet was met with strong resistance from the Sicilian Greeks, as was his choice to lift the siege. Much like the Greeks of Tarentum, they opposed his decision to pursue a new campaign before completing the objectives he had promised them. They saw this as a selfish move, prioritizing his own interests over their needs. The abandonment of the siege was a significant mistake on Pyrrhus's part. Historical precedent from the previous 2 centuries showed that the Carthaginians could swiftly recover and use Lilybaeum as a base for regaining control of Sicily. Pyrrhus would have been better served by continuing the siege until it was successful. Pyrrhus's command to the Greeks to build a new fleet was also a key factor in his rapid decline in popularity. It is possible that this would not have occurred if Pyrrhus had clearly shown that the fleet was intended to be used for capturing Lilybaeum, as the Greeks had requested before the siege began. After abandoning the siege of Lilybaeum, Pyrrhus returned to the eastern part of the island, where the Mamertines of Messina had been demanding tribute from the nearby Greek cities. Pyrrhus captured and executed the Mamertines' tax collectors, then defeated them in battle, despite their reputation for being numerous and warlike. He also destroyed many of their strongholds. This victory allowed Pyrrhus to briefly restore some of the reputation he had lost during the course of his campaign. Recognizing the growing hostility among the Greek cities, Pyrrhus stationed garrisons in them, justifying this move by the renewed threat posed by the Carthaginians. In doing so, he violated the city's freedoms in nearly every possible way, leaving them with no semblance of autonomy. Ultimately, his most severe transgression was the imposition of these garrisons, which undermined the city's independence entirely. For a time, the Greek cities tolerated Pyrrhus's demands, likely intimidated by his garrisons and military strength. However, the Greek rulers who had initially invited Pyrrhus to Sicily, Thonon and Sosistratus, eventually fell out with him. Pyrrhus began to suspect that they were plotting against him, despite their previous loyalty and support in his campaigns. In response, Sosistratus wisely fled, while Thonon was arrested and executed. This seems to have been the breaking point. The growing discontent among the Greek cities erupted into open rebellion against Pyrrhus. Many of them allied with the Carthaginians, while others sought refuge from the Mamertines, their former oppressors. Such was their intense hatred of the king. To the Sicilian Greeks, Pyrrhus's title as King of Sicily now appeared as a bitter imposition rather than a mark of honor. The Greek revolt against Pyrrhus revitalized the Carthaginians. Reinforced from Africa, they, according to Zonaras, took up the war vigorously. Although Pyrrhus won a battle against the advancing Carthaginians, it was another Cadmean victory. Pyrrhus lost control of Sicily as quickly as he had gained it. With the island in rebellion and the Carthaginians on the offensive, Pyrrhus received urgent letters from the Samnites and Tarentines. Since his departure from Italy, they had been losing ground to the Romans and requested his assistance, giving him an excuse to abandon Sicily. As Plutarch notes, it was not seen as a retreat, but in truth, Pyrrhus was unable to maintain control of Sicily. Pyrrhus's campaign in Sicily lasted from 278 to 276 BC, but ultimately achieved little. His ambitions of establishing a Sicilian and African empire were thwarted, and his Italian allies were resentful after losing ground to the Romans. Plutarch attributes a famous quote to Pyrrhus as he sailed away from Sicily, in which he supposedly said, "My friends, what a wrestling ground for Carthaginians and Romans we are leaving behind us." However, this statement is likely apocryphal, as events in the following year would demonstrate that Pyrrhus had not yet abandoned his hopes of defeating the Romans and creating an empire in Italy.